The I Mold You So podcast with Katie Buckland Weiss.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the I Mold You So podcast, the show that dives deep into the often hidden truths of mold illness, what toxins are really doing to our bodies, and how we can support true healing, mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Katie Buckland Weiss, and today I'm joined by one of the most integrative, holistic practitioners I've personally experienced in my healing journey, Dr. Allana Patel, chiropractor and founder of Wisdom and Truth Wellness in Lubbock. Dr. Patel brings a unique blend of chiropractic care, acupuncture, allergy elimination, and nervous system focused therapies, which we will dive into today. And these are all rooted in helping the body function optimally. We'll talk about how trauma, environmental toxins, nervous system stress, and yes, mold impact the whole person and what real healing looks like beyond symptom management. So, Dr. Allana, you and I met back in the early months of 2024. I rolled into your office. I believe I saw your husband first. I was experiencing a wide variety of symptoms. My nervous system was clearly shot. I was not functioning at all. But I was doing a mix of conventional and integrative medicine, just trying to figure out what is causing these symptoms. I'm urinating all the time. My vision is blurry. I'm having all of this weird pain that nothing will help, calm it down. And these just kept compiling and compounding month after month after month. And I was in and out of your office having acupuncture treatments, chiropractic treatments, trying to calm my body while we were also trying to figure out what is causing this. Yeah. And I remember specifically in July, I think you had recently just returned from maternity leave. And I was on your table. My daughter was in the room with us and you were doing acupuncture and I was crying, not because of the acupuncture, but because there was something deep in my body that was just causing this zinging and I was getting no relief. And in this particular appointment, my left kind of upper back was hurting just so tender inside and out. And 2 days later, we found out I had this atypical pneumonia and we weren't able to heal it, treat it for several rounds of antibiotics. And then we ultimately got to mold. And then you all were helping me just really calm my nervous system and try to de-stress. So I'm so grateful for y'all's support. My husband also comes to see y'all or did come to see y'all and doing great work. You have a lot of pregnant moms in your office as well. So doing great work there in West Texas. And I'm so excited to have you join me today. One, because you've gone alongside me on this journey, but you are doing great work for all sorts of patients, adults, children, you name it. And I can't wait to dive into that in detail today and talk about environmental stressors, nervous system, all the things that add up. And you treat all sorts of stuff. So before we get into that, can you share just a little bit about how you became or how you came into chiropractic care? And why you chose a holistic approach that includes things like acupuncture, NET, and nervous system focused therapies.
Totally. I'm glad to be here. So I grew up going to a chiropractor and it was a husband and wife team actually in East Texas. And she kind of became our primary care, so to speak. And we just kind of went to her for as my mom started transitioning into more holistic ways of doing things. That just kind of became the person that we went to growing up. So it's kind of what I knew. So I guess I can contribute that to my mom. And then when it got time for me, I went to undergrad, and when it got time for me to choose, I was actually going to go medical doctor, PA route, something like that. Like that was where I was on.
Okay.
Pre-PA, pre-med. But I went home and actually shadowed the wife or the lady, Dr. Tina Ingram in East Texas. I want to, give her just acknowledgement and recommendation. Anyways, I went home and shadowed her and she just asked me the question. She just said, why are you going to go and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars and, multiple years of your life learning things that you just really don't believe in and that you don't want to practice, all to come out of that and then have to relearn what you want to actually do.
Right.
And she just said, I would just, ask you to reconsider what you want to do. And at that point, I was like, I'm a very logical person. Like somebody brings a logical thing to me. I'm like, that makes sense. Like, why would I do that? And so I just shifted and went to chiropractic and did acupuncture while I was in school there and everything and never looked back.
We're very grateful for that. So your philosophy and the clinic's philosophy seems rooted in empowering the body to heal itself and supporting the body that way. In your words, what does that really mean? Especially when someone comes in with complex chronic issues, which I would put myself in that case. What does that really mean? Empowering the body to heal itself.
Yeah, I love that. So I feel like we take the perspective that the body was designed for vitality, for freedom, for health, for abundance. Like that is the perspective that we take. And while I feel like we live in a culture where chronic disease and autoimmune and all of those things, like they run rampant, and we're even seeing it younger and younger. It is coming up in the pediatric population. So I feel like when people come in, it's almost like having to rewire their belief systems about their body because oftentimes they've come to us with this distrust and disconnect from their body. And like I said, a lot of times that can even start like at conception. I feel like even the motherhood journey through pregnancy is wrought with needing to be tended to and test, and it's almost like she's sick, as if it's not like just a normal human physiology for her to take part in, and then baby's born. So it's just like it's literally even from before I feel like babies are born that it's this like subconscious programming into our like cells and DNA that like your body is not capable and it needs outside things to tell it what to do. And so whenever we say like empowering the body to heal itself, it's almost like said like helping people rewire that belief system that their bodies can heal. Like they were made to live in this like vitality space and not always be chasing symptoms and having this massive nervous system dysregulation,
Yeah.
and things like that, like that's not how I don't think that's how we were designed to live. While it is common in our population, it doesn't make it normal.
Right. And, I do think there is a time and place for conventional medicine. But in my journey and in my experience, when we were trying to figure out what was going on, I was getting all sorts of diagnoses
Right.
and then, I was given medicine for like nerve pain and stuff. And it was making me worse. But I kept thinking, like, no, this will fix me. This will fix me.
Right.
And I had to really, I was at rock bottom. And now that I'm on the other side of this, what's remarkable is once I was out of the moldy environment, because my mycotoxin load was just so high and overflowing and affecting all my symptoms,
Right.
that once I removed that, there really wasn't a medicine or a
Right.
pill that was going to help me. What helped me, and we'll talk about this in greater detail, and we've talked about before, like sauna was
Right.
huge, right? Getting the toxins out so that the body was now optimal to heal itself and live in optimization.
Right.
So I absolutely am picking up what you're putting down.
Well, and even I was just gonna say, even talking about the sauna, like that is a literally a natural God-given way to, detox the body. Like, is getting, I mean, you can do it in the sauna, but you could also do it, if it's sunny outside and you get out, it's just sweating, right?
Right.
That's a natural detox mechanism.
Yeah.
So,
And salt,
yeah.
the detox baths with salt. I
Yes.
mean, it's all there. It's already
Right.
here.
Right.
Okay, so for many people tuning in, when we talk about mold, the nervous system, the whole body impact. So one of the things that I have continued to talk about on the podcast is the nervous system
Yeah.
and how my personal experience, I didn't realize what a huge part outside of the physical symptoms I was having, the
Yeah.
constant urination, the zinging, the pain, the retracted left arm, the dragging of the left leg. I had all of that going on, but there was this underlying like nervous system that at the time I didn't really realize, like I was coming to y'all to like calm down and trying therapies to calm down. But I honestly thought that was just like anxiousness because I was falling apart and I didn't know what was causing and I had these young children and all of this stuff. But now I realize kind of what you were saying, like this started a long time ago with the nervous system, maybe
Yeah.
even from childhood. And then you add in things like mold and mycotoxin and it just explodes. So
Yes.
for many people tuning in, mold illness isn't well understood, and you are seeing more and more of this in your clinic.
Yeah.
How do you think repeated toxin exposure like mold is showing up in the nervous system with, posture, digestion, sleep, pain, and chronic fatigue? What are you seeing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like so when you say toxin exposure, this is something I feel like that we touch on here is saying that The body doesn't differentiate necessarily between like traumas or toxins, right? If it's an emotional trauma, if it's mold, if it's, childhood abuse, so to speak, or your parents yelled all the time or whatever, like the body doesn't know how to differentiate that. It just views like I'm unsafe, right? Like it just views my environment as I'm unsafe.
Well,
So I feel like the symptoms that come along with that, I mean, they range. It's wild how much they range. Because it can start to affect every organ system. And oftentimes it'll switch, right? Like based on honestly, it's the memory of the cells, I think, that it plays out on like what was trigger and what that triggers in the memory of the like deep nervous system in the cellular like imprintation. I hope that's not wording that's just crazy, but
no, I mean,
anyway,
we talked about this yesterday and I
yes,
experienced that. So I had never had nervous system dysregulation, deregulation like I had during the height of mold illness.
right.
And I had tremors and shaking. Now, whether that was a result of like physical manifestation of the mold and mycotoxins, or it was like the mental manifestation, if you will, whenever I have high stress or high trauma or traumatic experience, even now, my body reverts back to
Mhm,
like this shaking. And I'm like, what in the world? And
mhm.
then I have to do my nervous system calming things. And it can last for 12 hours,
Yeah.
but it's like hardwired, as you mentioned, like programmed at the cellular level.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and so that's where I feel like those symptoms, which kind of makes, I mean, mold, but also just like said, like a bigger picture, of just that nervous system dysregulation. That's why people come in with so many different symptoms because when it's nervous system, it's whole body, right? Like, so it's impacting all these, so it can be pain. It can look like a lot of different diagnoses out there. It can look like hypothyroidism. It can look like IBS. It can look
Yeah.
like, there's all these different things that people come in with, and really at the root of it, like said, it's nervous system dysregulation, but then I think you also have to get into some of the details, like, is it the mold? Is it the like, what is causing, the nervous system dysregulation? So
So I'm curious because you have all sorts of patients come in. You have folks that are pregnant and expecting, see pediatrics, you see folks like me. When, you have this broad, I guess, scope,
mhm.
because this is focused on mold, I'm curious, like, is that one of the check boxes when you see a patient? Like, do you bring up mold, or maybe now that you're seeing it more in your office, you bring it up, like on your checklist of what this could be or what your patient's bodies are telling you, what you're seeing when you're doing your evaluations? Is mold on that checkbox, and how often are you seeing it in your office?
Yeah, it is on our initial checklist. I would say probably in the past year, we've gotten a little bit more. I've done some specific training on mold. Prior to that, I would say I was pretty big picture and definitely would not consider myself a mold specialist even today. But in the past year, we have seen such an uptick in it. And mold, I say mold, and it can mean anything from the aspergillus and things you see in the house,
Right.
penicillin, even to candida, right? Like candida is a fungal, it's a mold, and
Right.
it reacts just like that. And so I feel like we've seen an uptick. I don't know if it's just that we're looking for it more because it is on our initial checklist that
Right.
we will test and on our biofeedback scan that we do. But I would say upwards of 50% of patients have some kind of mold exposure and that being like a part in their story or in their
Mhm.
plan. It may not be like the part, may not be the priority, but I would say 50% or more that is showing up for some kind of mold.
Yeah. And then, I've learned through this that you have to look at your patient profile because not everybody has a sensitivity to mold like I did. I think it's 25% of the population, right? I'm also MTHFR. Like, I have trouble detoxing. So
Yes.
I think it's also important to remind folks, just because you're in a moldy environment doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be sick like I was. And
Right.
like my husband had certain symptoms and my son had certain symptoms. And then I had crazy intense symptoms. It really took me down. But on a previous podcast, I actually had a gal from West Texas join me, and she was talking about EMFs, the electromagnetic frequencies.
Mhm.
And what's so interesting about this is EMFs, are everywhere now and at
Everywhere.
much higher levels than they were 10, 15, 20, surely 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But if you take a petri dish with mold and set it next to an EMF, it just explodes. And
Yes.
so I wonder, I'm just kind of, surmising here, if you will, that if there's not a correlation in the amount of EMFs we're exposed to and the level of, mold cases that you're seeing. Just for fun, in addition to mold, like what are like the top 5 complaints or top 5 patient profile that come into your office if you're able to share?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I do like to preface just with, the fact that we are chiropractors, we can't treat these specific symptoms that if they come in with a diagnosis of hypothyroidism or Crohn's or, things of that nature, we don't treat those. We treat the nervous system as a whole. And that is truly how we view it is they might come in with specific symptoms. And we do have some that I'll mention that are the top ones, but just want to be really clear on the fact that like our scope of practice, we do not treat specific things, but I actually think that's what is a good thing that kind of differs us from the traditional medical route is, viewing the body as a whole and the system as a whole and not organs in their little boxes, like all operating separately. Right. So
Right.
anyways, I would say, yeah, kind of top 5 things that come in here would be anything women's hormone based. So lots of infertility, PCOS, fibroids, like anything in that bucket, we see a lot of. And then secondly, I would say autoimmune conditions, ranging from lupus to Hashimoto's. I mean, across the board, rheumatoid, just like we have all kinds, of different ones. And then third, I would say blood sugar issues. We see lots of blood sugar
Wow.
issues and actually
Okay.
see it early. We have, I would say probably 10 to 15 children, 15 or under, with like pre-diabetic or diabetic like numbers on blood work. And so it's just like
Okay.
seeing it younger and younger, which is just wild. But anyways, and then I would say if I had to say mold, I would say like said, I feel like in the past year, we have definitely increased our uptake of, or uptick of people we're seeing with that and getting a little more direct at how we handle that. And then I would say eczema. Gosh, pediatric eczema. I just feel like there is like so many skin problems.
Wow. And what do you think? We're getting a little off here, but I'm very curious. What do you think, if you can speak to it, like the driving factor behind the eczema?
Well, I think you mentioned EMFs, and I really do believe it's multifold. I believe it's our food system. Our food system. I'm sure you've talked about it on your podcast, but just soil depleted, and our food is just not great unless you're really intentional about it.
Right.
EMFs, I think, are huge. Just the screen time that we're on, and just the onslaught of the electromagnetic stuff that we are exposed to just dysregulates the body so much. And then I believe stress. I believe we're so busy in American culture. Like we do not know how to rest. We don't know how to slow down. And I think everybody knows stress it's huge, right? Like in anything.
Yeah.
And then
And it's tough to manage stress. I mean, that's the thing, right? You're a mom of 4, you're running your own business. Like there's all these things. But I have to just commend you. You and your husband are so intentional about managing that and have done such a great job with a work-life balance. So, we can definitely take notes from you. So when we look at your office, chiropractic adjustments, well, actually, let me take a step back. So some of the things that I did in your office, I did the wellness machine. I want to talk about that. I did acupuncture, and then I don't know what this was called. I might call it muscle testing, but you all went through a series of, Dr. Allana, I don't know what it's called, the little vials.
files.
Like, talk to me a little bit about what you're doing there, like when somebody comes in.
With the muscle testing.
Yes.
You mean? Yeah. So the best way that I describe muscle testing is just saying that everything in our universe operates off of frequencies. And people get a little woo-wooed out whenever we say frequencies, but that's just like laws of physics. Like if you take it back to the very basics in chemistry, even like the periodic table, and break it down to the atom, everything operates off of that exchange of a positive and negative ion, which is just frequencies, right? And that's how our entire body system, it's an electrical system, even though that's not talked about, I feel like, a lot in mainstream medicine, or really even in holistic, I would say, medicine, but it's an electrical system. And so the frequencies in the vials, it's imprinting it's a vial of water. But you can imprint frequencies into the water because it has to have a water medium. to hold the frequency. And so all bacteria, viruses, parasites, foods, emotions, like everything holds a certain frequency or charge. Then you can totally Google on the internet. It's been researched. You can see where it lands on that frequency scale. And so then the body, we put it in, the hand of someone and muscle test the arm. And it's not testing the muscle like physical therapy, right? Like the strength of the muscle. It's actually the cascade effect that happens in between the joints. So the nervous system, there's in between the little neuromuscular junctions within the, not nervous system, but the nerves. Yeah. So it is a nervous system, I guess you could say. But anyways, the brain cannot think about making that cascade happen and locking that joint out if you're holding something that your body is weak to. So say you're holding mold, or candida, right? And your body's already overrun with mold or candida, then the brain cannot think about negating the charge that you just put in an extra charge of the mold and candida, right? When your body's already overly charged with it, and the brain can't think about holding up that arm and making that locking happen in the joint, and negating the charge that you're holding on to.
That is fascinating. So then that gives you clues or data about your patient and then their patient plan with y'all.
Right. And that is another thing I'd say about muscle testing is obviously it's not 100%. It's a scan. It's a really easy scanning tool, kind of that front line. And then what shows up there, you can go deeper, right? You can test for mycotoxins. You could test for food sensitivities, and that we start going deeper into the test if we feel like we need to, or we can confirm on biofeedback scan.
Yeah.
It saves people a lot of money and time. Just to be able to get that frontline scan and then start some stuff. And then if we need to go deeper into the $500, $600, $700 test, then we can.
Right. But you have a little bit of a roadmap, a blueprint of some
Right.
sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
So knowing that chiropractors are a huge part of y'all's offering, when we talk about chiropractic adjustments and correcting spinal misalignments, can you explain how that relates to detoxification or immune system function? So when I come in to get adjusted, and there's folks that get adjusted, their children's ear infection, they get adjusted. Talk to me about all that can offer with detoxification and immune system function.
Yeah, totally. So the way I describe kind of adjustment is just saying it's just an input into the nervous system. And so, we adjust the spine or, ears, like, which is just working on your cranial bones, essentially. And so each vertebra is connected to a certain organ system or muscle. So, nerves come out from the spine and they connect to different organ systems. And then you also have, top of the neck and low, like sacrum, low back, sacrum area is directly correlated with your parasympathetic nervous system. And then the mid back is directly correlated with your sympathetic nervous system. So also you can totally feel the tissues on, or I can feel the tissues on someone's back and tell immediately if they are in sympathetic just by the tone of the tissues.
Wow,
top or
that's
bottom.
remarkable. So
It's
you can
amazing.
touch them and you can know, okay, here's what we're working against or working with.
Yeah, there had been and just knowing if there's inflammation around a certain vertebra level, like there has been too many times to count now where somebody will be on initial, they'll lay down and I'll be feeling, and around the C7 area, it'll be kind of swollen. It can be called the buffalo hump. And I'll be like, oh, like, do you have thyroid, problems? And they're like, how'd you know? Like if they're just coming to us for chiropractic, or maybe they're not coming for anything else. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I can just tell by the way of like feeling the inflammation around that C7, like these nerves that connect, to the thyroid, like there's inflammation there. So yeah, totally. But anyways, saying that it is an input to the nervous system. And so we do it very specifically based on what we're treating and what people are coming in for. It will impact, what organ systems need to be responding differently, essentially, whether that, and the cool thing about the nervous system is like, it knows what to do. It's kind of like adaptogenic herbs. If you're familiar with that, taking those like ashwagandha and things like that, it's like you take them and the body like distributes it to where it needs to go. Like it has this innate intelligence, right? Like you give it to it and then it sends it to the places that it needs. And I feel like that's a really good way to kind of describe an adjustment is like you're putting an input to specific nerves that, go to specific organ systems, but also the body's just very like, just responds knowing like, okay, I need to go lower or higher or whatever I need to do with that organ system.
And
So,
it's just supporting what the body already knows it needs to
right.
do. But for one reason, whether it's trauma or illness or toxins, it's stuck,
Right.
Something that has been huge in my recovery is lymph support.
Mm.
Do you
Mhm.
guys dabble in that? Do you pay attention to lymph? How does that work in your practice?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say we do anything specific towards lymph. The light therapy would impact the lymph a little bit, but we refer out for lymphatic massage. And I would say prior to you coming in, I personally did not realize the connection with the lymphatics and mold. Really, probably any toxins. Honestly, it's just something I had not I hadn't pieced that together in my walk. But like I said, the past year, we've had more cases and making that correlation of, oh, you have to get the lymph moving or everything you're detoxing just dumps into the lymph and recirculates in the system. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yes. And I learned that the hard way, but also I learned it and I know it worked because once I was doing sauna, but when I started moving my lymph and I don't remember what it's called, ELT, I think, where they were the glass
Mhm.
wands and the gas in the glass wands help stimulate that, that lymph. And I remember I had done 2 or 3 sessions and it was a Saturday morning and I was maybe 4 months out of the environment. It was
Mhm.
a Saturday morning. I had 3 treatments, maybe the week before. And I opened the sunroof. My kids were in the back seat. And I threw my hands out of the sunroof and I was like, I am healed. I felt so good. And it was the first time in, 14, 15 months, I had felt just a snippet of normal, no pain. My symptoms lifted and it was short lived.
Right.
But I was like, what did I do that allowed me to feel this way? And so the
Right.
more and more I moved the lymph, the more my body was really able to detox. And then that allowed my body to calm down and the nervous system, it's just domino effect.
Totally. So yeah.
Okay, so looking at holistic tools and interventions, so you combine chiropractic care with therapies like NAET and then NET, and I believe I did NET with y'all, but again, I was in a very fragile state,
Totally.
just like I was on eggshells. Y'all also do sound and light therapy. You did light therapy on me when I was feeling much, much better. So how do these modalities complement each other when someone has, in this case, let's talk about toxin or mold illness. So I know you have some cases right now. Are you using some of these other modalities to support their recovery?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I feel like, all of them come back into that big picture, nervous system dysregulation and then trying to regulate it. And so we do use the allergy. I would say we actually have implemented using the allergy therapy technique a lot more with the mold in the past or toxin, whatever you want to call it, whether it's heavy metals, things like that. In the past year, realizing that that plays a big part because the body actually becomes once it tips over that edge and becomes sensitive to it,
The
it's
cup
just
fills up, right? The cup flows over.
yeah, you can walk into a mold environment and immediately it's just the symptoms are insane. You just have no tolerance for it. And
Right.
so it's almost like a allergy in a way. That's how the body responds to it at least.
Yeah.
And then the NET using that just because we're seeing that with any chronic thing, whether it's mold, whether it's autoimmune, whatever it is, there is a deeply connected emotional component.
I mean, it was like a therapy session, I felt
Oh,
like. And
yeah.
I did it with Dr. Niraj.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for Dr. Niraj that he was
He's
that
so
he
good
had
at
me
it.
that day, but it was absolutely true. When I look at the full picture of everything that was going on in my life and that
Yeah.
my husband was sick
Yes.
and leading up to this, I was so anxious about what's happening to my husband. We don't know what's going on with him. And the pressures of being a mom and a very, demanding job and all of these things. And it kind of tapped into that and allowed it to kind of pour out,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But it again was overflowing that allowed me to heal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I said, any kind of chronic thing, if somebody's walked through it, I feel like there's a huge grieving that goes along with it of grieving the life that you had, that you lost, grieving the person that you want to be for the people in your life, grieving feeling good, having a
Right.
body that you can trust and is functioning well. I mean, just all this grief that nobody really talks about that comes with a chronic thing, whatever the chronic thing is, mold, whatever.
You're right.
There's a huge piece of grief that I don't think people talk about, which is I think why I see a lot of lung things actually whenever they're walking, it always hits the lungs because Grief is
Okay,
so.
dive into that. So grief, you see it in the lungs?
Yeah, so each, emotion has a different organ system that it kind of resonates with or ties with. Yeah, and so grief, would be, with the lungs, and then we have anger with liver, resentment's gallbladder, anxiety, stomach, fear is kidneys. And so you can see where all of those would start to become a factor as you walk along chronic illness. You're gonna have fear
Wow.
of never healing, right? You're gonna have anger, you're gonna have resentment for not figuring it out, for, somebody not supporting you. I don't, there's just all these things, like all the emotions are at play when it comes into anything chronic.
It is remarkable hearing about the correlation with the certain systems or the certain organs. And for me, when this first started, it was my left kidney, right?
Hmm.
And this makes absolute sense. I looked at my husband on the airplane and I'm like, something's not right. It's not a kidney stone, but this is in my kidney. This is in my kidney.
Right.
Fast forward 6 weeks, then I was peeing, up to 60
Right.
times a day. Craziness. But you mentioned fear
Right.
and leading up to the onset. We were in a moldy environment. It was the perfect storm. But the 2 years leading up to that, I had been living in constant fear. One, because of my husband's health. I didn't want to leave the children alone with him. What was happening? What does our future look like? What's happening to
His
this healthy
job,
man?
COVID.
The fear
Yeah.
was, and then you layered on the mold. And
Right.
so it's
Exactly.
remarkable. And then the anger and the liver. And I remember Dr. Niraj saying, your liver is not okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very, very interesting stuff. And then talk to me a little bit about the light modality.
Yeah. The light therapy.
Yes.
Yeah, and like how we use it in relation to mold,
Yeah. And,
essentially.
and just in your
The
clinic across the
toxin.
board.
Yeah. So it's so a lot of people, when we start talking about our light therapy, think that it is like red light therapy. And it's actually on the opposite side of the spectrum, the light spectrum. So red light therapy is way over here, operates around like 800 nanometers. And then we use the violet, and it's around like 420 nanometers on the light spectrum. And so just very different lighting, and it penetrates a lot deeper. So it penetrates deeper organ systems all the way into the cell. And then we also have
Wow.
vials that we can insert, that we like insert into the little flashlight looking thing that's full of, whether we want to do plants, or we have all kinds of different ones that have different plants or food or whatever. And that will also take those nutrients of whatever vial we put in directly into the cells. And so it bypasses that digestive system. And that's a huge thing we've seen when the light therapy helpful for people like kids, if they can't take the supplements,
Right.
or if it's adults where their digestive systems are shot. Like any supplement you take has to have a properly working digestive system, liver, like all of that
To
to
be
get where it needs
absorbed,
to
right?
go. Yeah.
Right.
That's why we have people come in with bags full of supplements still sick. Because it's like, well, none of those are being uptaken. They're not even working.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I
yeah.
laugh at that because, I'm very open about the financial impact that this had on our family, upwards of, 6 figures. And I was taking every supplement. Now, I was going to all sorts of doctors, but my kitchen counter was covered because one doctor's like, this looks like this and this looks like this. And so I was on a mix of prescriptions and supplements. And what is so crazy about this is at one point I was like, I'm stopping everything. I'm
Right.
stopping everything.
You knew.
And what is so great now is I'm on just a minimal supplements that I
Yeah.
know are working, and helping me get to full wellness. And
Yeah.
those are things like methylated B, because I'm MTHFR. And so I know I need to take that, but I was taking all sorts of stuff that just didn't make any sense.
No.
One other thing I want to talk about some of the things that y'all have available. When I was there in December, I made an appointment to see you, and I did biofeedback, and I was so excited because there wasn't much on it, which I was like, this is great, because I think I had done biofeedback 2 times before. Then it was like, there's a lot of things going on. Yeah, there wasn't enough like printer paper to capture it
Yeah.
all. But I was really excited to do that biofeedback and say, hey, like there was something with my eyes that we were able to address.
Right.
So talk a little bit, if you will, about biofeedback and what you're using it for and how it's helping your patients.
Yeah, totally. So biofeedback, like I say, the best way I know how to describe it is it uses the vagus nerve, if you remember that, and vagus nerve connects to all organ systems. And so it sends a frequency down the vagus nerve, and then it scans basically the energetic output of all the organs, major organ systems. And so it sends that back, reads it on the computer, and then we can cross check whether that's from bacterial, viral, parasitic. Is it heavy metals? Is it emotions? Is it, those are the main ones. I was like, is it or anything else? But those are the main ones that we look at. And so that really helps us kind of prioritize, honestly. Like if we have a complex case come in and they're showing up for like across the board things, we utilize kind of biofeedback to scan and confirm like where we need to start. But we're actually fixing to start a different location doing just biofeedback because we
Okay.
feel like it's a little underutilized here. We're already just at capacity with what we do.
Wow. Okay.
So
Great.
we're going to do a biofeedback where you can go and just get a scan and get all those because, lots of people know a lot of what to do if they can just figure out what they're dealing with.
Right.
If it's not super complex cases, you could just come get scanned and see what organ systems you need to support and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm so grateful for being exposed to that because I didn't know about it otherwise. Okay, let's move on. I have a couple other questions for you. Bear with me as I
Mhm.
come down here. So we talked a little bit about approaching testing and tracking results with complicated histories and kind of identifying, hey, here's the biggest problem. We need to back into that. In the offerings that you have, are there any tests that you find particularly insightful that we haven't covered yet?
For any kind of chronic toxin
Yes.
type stuff. Yeah. So I would say cortisol is probably one of a 24-hour cortisol panel has been one of our biggest things that and it's really not super expensive because that gives you an overall picture, like the graphing of how cortisol should go from morning, to evening, shows if how much stress the body has been under essentially, like how long I can tell by a cortisol graph essentially how long a nervous system has been dysregulated. Is
Mm,
it pretty short term? Is it not going to take very long to fix? Or like, wow, this has been dysregulated for years.
okay.
So we're looking at a longer prognosis essentially. So I would say, yeah, a cortisol is something that I feel like we've implemented and is very helpful.
Well, that's great, and it doesn't break the bank.
No, yeah. And there's some other tests. I mean, we do some mycotoxin tests and some things like that and more in-depth hormone panels and we genetic testing, all the MTHFR, all of that COMT, like all those things. And I do feel like those are really helpful. But once again, I just feel like they're very expensive. Like you start getting into the four,
Right.
five,
A
$600 for
test,
every
right.
test. And so, we do our best to not just bombard people when they first come in with needing all these. We do our best, to do what we can. But if we're not seeing results, then we say probably need to do these like deeper tests because we just can't figure things out. We need more data essentially.
Right. So I'm curious if you can share a story without naming names or sharing patients of a patient whose life shifted dramatically through your approach, right? Especially someone with symptoms that traditional medicine hadn't resolved. And then I would love to hear about maybe some of the mold cases you've seen recently. If you can share, like when they walked in your office, what led you to think it was mold, or did they already know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I would say one that comes to mind, she's moved now, which is unfortunate, but she came in and came from kind of the traditional medical route because her husband actually worked and was kind of very high up in a couple of the hospitals here in town. And so had kind of been to all the big things here in town. What we had to offer here, she had done it and she had been to the specialist and she had done all the things. And essentially came to our office just so depleted. She had lost weight, was pale, just so fatigued. She had 3 kids at home and, just could not take care of them and ended up sending them to school. She wanted to homeschool, but had to send to school because she just couldn't even really get out of bed.
Mm,
And at that point, she had ended up being on a parasite cleanse. So she had kind of started dipping her toes into some of the holistic world. And somebody put her on a parasite cleanse. And essentially, I just said, I think you're too depleted to do that cleanse right now. I really think you need to kind of come in and support, the system before trying to detox and clean out because that takes a lot of energy. And if you do that when your system's already depleted, if you do heavy
hmm
detoxes, I mean, it just shoves you down in the hole you're
Right.
already in.
Can make you so sick.
My
Right.
gosh.
Slow
Yeah.
and steady. When they talk about detox, this
Yes.
is something I learned, like, gotta be careful. Okay.
Yes. Slow and steady. Anyways, and so Yeah, and just said, "I really think you need to come off that." And then we kinda came in and supported with acupuncture and just some, wellness machine, the microcurrent that we use, some things that could just, like, support and pour back into her body and not, like, heavy supplementation or diet changes or anything like that, like, literally us just coming along and doing what we can to support you. And literally, it was like night and day within, like, 2 weeks. She just, like, had brain fog lift, she had energy, like,
Wow.
replenished, and she was eating good and stuff at home. Like, she did a lot of things right, already. And so I feel like when somebody comes in that situation where they're already doing a lot of the right things, once again, I feel like the body wants to be healthy. Like, it wants to be well.
Right.
And so when you take out, what's depleting it and replenish with what it needs, like, it usually,
It turned her around.
yeah, so quickly. And
That's
it was just
great.
beautiful. So,
And then for some of your mold patients right now, like how
yeah.
did they present? How did you land
Mhm.
on mold with them? Or did
Yeah,
they
so
already know?
I'm thinking of 2 different families. One did know and one didn't. So we have a family that lived, but they didn't correlate it because, and this is, I see this, I feel like a lot pop up, and you could probably speak to it too. But I see that if they lived in a moldy environment, maybe it was 3, 4 years ago, and then they moved out, they think that like completely solved everything. Like, all you had to do was move out, of the moldy environment, which is a huge piece to the
Right.
puzzle. But, if you live in a moldy environment, it can be on your clothes, it can be on your books, it can be on your furniture, it can be on everything, your
Yep.
pets, everything. And so
Mattress, all of it. Yep.
mattress. Oh yeah, I mean, it can be everywhere. And so depending on, where it is in the house. But anyway, so we have a family that is came in pretty recently within the last like month and a half. And so they knew that they had been exposed to mold, but there's all these symptoms that had really started rearing their head probably in the last like 7 to 8 months. So there was kind of a gap where it's like moved out of the house, kind of got better. There was a little increase in getting better. And then it's like all these symptoms started popping up
Mm,
about 7 to 8 months ago, which was about 3 years post moving out of the house. And so anyways, started through our testing and had 2 of the kids come in first, and
okay.
they both showed up for a moldy stuff. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, like, hadn't thought." And then now the family's coming in and,
The whole family. So you're treating the whole family. Wow.
yeah. And yeah, and so utilizing a lot of microcurrent for that, and I feel like that's a huge player in it.
And
And
that's
then
the
also
wellness machine, right? The
that's the
microcurrent
wellness
is the
machine.
wellness machine. Okay.
Mhm.
So there's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
code, if my memory serves me right, that you can
Mhm.
put in for specific things.
Mhm.
That wellness machine is something else.
Yeah, it's incredible. I feel like the microcurrent we see just lots of good stuff with that. But anyways, utilizing that while also, supporting the body's detox, methods. And that's something, like I said, we've really brought in the past year of just, it's come into our field of view of how important supporting that part of it was that we just didn't realize in the past. You
Oh, that's
live to
wonderful.
learn and you learn through
Right.
the journey of doing it. And so educating them on how to, whether it's sauna, whether it's lymphatics, like whatever, but you need to support the detox pathways to get it out. And so that family, and then we have another family that is two daughters, and they had no idea. They came in with migraines. They were having headaches, off and on, so fatigued. That's probably one of the biggest. I mean, with mold, I just feel like you're just wiped with the energy and kind
Yeah.
of foggy. And so they were having that, and then also having some weird random just pains like that would kind of migrate throughout the body.
Oh my gosh. I'm having PTSD just hearing about it. Yeah.
I know. Well, and they play sports, so they just kind of chalked it up to sports, and it's easy, especially in the teenage. I mean, any population, I feel like it's easy to chalk up, but just they're busy with
Growing
school,
pains.
growing, yeah, like, oh, they started their period. Like, it's so easy just to pin it on everything else. And so we actually, in the beginning, mold is not like the top thing, and so we kind of started with some other stuff. Made a little improvement, but not a lot. And then, so we were rechecking, and we actually did the biofeedback scan because we're like, we feel like something's missing. And
Okay.
that popped up with the top being mold. And we're like, we think there's mold, somewhere. Anyways, ended up being
Dr.
in the
Allana, did it say like what specific type of mold, or it just said mold and then you guys were able to dig into it, or maybe going to dig into what type of mold?
it tells the specific. It'll give names.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
so helpful because then as the patient, they're
So
trying to
helpful.
figure out where am I being exposed to this? And there's certain molds that you might find in the house. Others, I learned that being in West Texas, aspergillus is very common on cotton. Well,
Yes.
what do we have in West Texas, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Everywhere.
so that's great that it's
Mhm.
You're able to identify that. So you were able to really identify that. And then I imagine you're helping them recover now.
Right. Yeah. It ended up being in their school is where they were being exposed to it. And the girl, she was like, I actually notice when I go in this one classroom, it smells and I get a headache. Like just started piecing like all these
Right.
things
You just
together.
like crack open the door and then it all makes sense.
Yes.
I
They
will
like,
say that Dr. Ben Edwards, who's also over there, who also helped us figure this out, when he was talking me through this, he said that he sees a lot of the college population with mold exposure because of the dorms.
Mhm.
And it's not that every symptom is the same, but there's kind of like a profile that he sees and he's like, okay, this is mold. Well, Dr. Allana, thank you so much for all of this. I'm curious, you're a mom to four precious little children. What keeps you inspired in your work, especially when these cases are complex and multi-layered? What keeps you really inspired in all the work that you and Dr. Niraj are doing?
Yeah, I would say those are actually like my favorite, is the complex cases that come in and have kind of like been to all the other places, and like tried all the things. Like when somebody comes in like that, one, because I know that they're willing to do whatever they have to do. Like it's like those are the cases that are just like, you just tell me what, like if you tell me to go put my feet in the dirt and lick a tree, that is what I'm
Sign me
gonna
up.
do. Yeah,
Right.
like yeah. And so they're just so willing, like their spirits are just so willing, and you don't have to get past the barriers with that. And I think another thing that just like inspires me has always been, I love my kids and we homeschool them at home. And so we have 4 kids, 6 and under, and so it's very busy at home and I don't work a whole lot right now. But knowing that one day like they'll be gone, they'll be out of the house and I love that I'm gonna have this, like to continue doing and even pour more time into one day. So
Right, and you're so curious, you
yes.
you are so curious and you're always learning, and I love that so much about you. I always wanna leave our listeners with a little tidbit or takeaway, and jokingly mentioned, like, "Go stick your feet in the dirt," and, we know how important grounding is and see the benefit of that. Earlier, you were talking about the vagus nerve, and I would love to hear from you, like, for example, I try to stimulate my vagus nerve in the shower. I hum,
Mhm.
and is there a free tip you can give the listeners, like how they could stimulate their vagus nerve, maybe outside of humming in the shower, that we can leave with the audience as a takeaway?
Yeah, totally. So gurgling water is a great way to do the vagus nerve. And then, like I said, humming in the shower or singing very loudly in the car if you're alone. But really and those it's just because it vibrates, it sends vibrations, which is literally frequency therapy. That's what I tell people, like, that's everything that we talk about, essentially. But I just say, like, getting out into nature is also a great way to stimulate, the vagus nerve. Literally putting your feet on the ground, getting in the sunshine, like, putting, your neck able to be in the sunshine and just, like, your face is great ways and they're free. Like, those every God gave us, like, everything that we need. We just gotta slow down enough to use it and do it.
Yeah, what's remarkable about that is I have a very dear friend who went through just incredible trauma. She lost her son when he was 18, and shortly after that, she had migraine start, just debilitating migraine. She had to go on long-term disability, and it was grief, and she
Totally.
recognized that, but nothing was helping her. And I had the opportunity to see her over the holidays, and she is great. I mean, her heart is still broken, but
Yes.
her migraines are gone and her health is improved. And I said, "Hey, now, like, what is this? Like, what was the turning factor?" She goes, "No joke. I got out into nature.
Yes, I
I got out
know.
into nature."
So simple.
And
It is so
I mean,
simple.
she will live and die by that.
Yes.
Well, again, Dr. Alana, thank you so much for joining us today and shedding light on how the nervous system, chiropractic care, and holistic understanding of the body all play a role in healing, especially for people dealing with mold. Like, I just cannot lean into how important nervous system support is. If you all want to learn more about Dr. Alana and the work she's doing at Wisdom and Truth Wellness, check them out at wisdomandtruthwellness.org, right? It's .org. And for all of you listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for prioritizing your health. And remember, as Dr. Alana would agree, your body knows how to heal when given the right support.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dr. Alana.
Thanks, Katie. Glad to be here.
The I Mold You So podcast with Katie Buckland Weiss.